Welcome to this week's episode of Inside the Headset presented by CoachComm. This week, we sit down with Moravian Head Coach Jeff Long. In this conversation, Coach Long discusses how his background as a teacher helped him in coaching, how he grew as a young coordinator, and being handed the keys to the Moravian program. But first, a word from CoachComm.
Deuce left, check with me. If they're in quarters match, we're going to Pittsburgh or Ohio.
They're in zero.
Let's go Hippo, Seattle, wide choice. If we call the protection right, it's 6.
When a play call is the difference between winning and losing, your headset choice could be your most important decision. When the call counts, CoachComm is the only choice for clear, dependable communication. Visit CoachComm.com for more info.
We got it, guys. Good job.
Now, let's get inside the headset with Coach Long.
Coach Long, what's happening, man?
Not much, but how we been? Everything good?
Been good, brother. Been good, man. Happy to be on with you today. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. It's been awesome to kind of follow along, man. It's a great platform, and you guys always do a bang-up job there at the convention and throughout the year, so we appreciate it.
Amen. Well, let's go ahead and dive into this thing, man. The favorite question I always like to ask at the beginning of this deal is, what point in time in your life did you know you want to be a part of this great profession?
Yeah, so, it's funny. I knew I wanted to teach. So, if I go, I knew when I was younger, I think, even middle school, high school, that I enjoyed teaching. But I don't know if I had eyes on college football until I got out of, done playing in college, and kind of happened by accident. I saw, some of the coaches I was around when I was playing at Muhlenberg, guys like Mike Donnelly, Tom Perkovich, who, were really influential to me, and then did a great job of teaching, and I learned a ton. And that's when I started to say, okay, maybe, hey, this college thing could be something I wanted to do, or just coaching as a profession, right? Because I went to school for education. Going to be a secondary ed, social studies teacher, coach high school football. I was going to be a happy camper, right? But then the more I got around it, the more I started to, just dive into the scheme side of things and just the day-to-day life of a college coach. I was, studying that and then helping out. And then I was like, okay, hey, I think this is something I can teach, the game. And I enjoy that competitive aspect of it, the chess match. And then also, too, I felt like the relationships were really meaningful, that the players and coaches had. And, once, I got out of school, I was coaching high school and, but was still looking, hey, I was, guy applied to every job on the scoop for over a year and a half, right? Had over 300 letters. And then, I got two responses back. Those old stories, they're real. When
they're
people
real.
do them, jokes, it sounds like a movie and all, but no, that's real. It's real. You can email from D3, NAI, all the way up to Nick Saban, and you ain't going to get an email back. It happens. So it makes it more meaningful when it pops. And that's kind of, that made me want it more, to be honest with you, because it was like, hey, if I get my shot, I loved what I was doing at the high school level. And, I was blessed too with people who gave me opportunities to lead at a young age, like being a coordinator. At Emmaus, I was working with the freshman and JV teams as the offensive coordinator, which is great from being just out of playing, right?
Right.
And then at AFCA, I was special teams coordinator at 22 years old, 21, you know what I mean?
Right.
So it did not because I was ready. It was like, hey, that's what was needed. I was going to step up and help. So I think that allowed me to kind of, again, just continue to study ball and then, have some fun with it. And then when the college opportunities started rolling, and in terms of I got a shot at Wilkes, so you just kind of took off from there.
That's awesome, man. You mentioned wanting to teach first, being a teacher, right? And you look at coaching, and it always kind of seems like a different deal. Obviously, you can fall in love, as you mentioned, with the schematics and, just some of the things that come with just specifically football. But when it comes down to it, the parallels of teaching and coaching, from getting a degree, what are the parallels that you see in as a teacher and a coach?
Oh, 100%. I think that any coach now, regardless of level, and not that you necessarily are looking at this, but I always, when I listen to a clinic or if I'm going to visit with somebody, you can tell right away who has been a part of that and studied education in some way, how they format what they're presenting, right? What's the plan, the pedagogy of hey, this is why we install the way we do. not because it's like, hey, we've always done it this way, or like, hey, this is how another guy did it.
Yeah.
Like, because I look at it as how does it make best sense for the kids, right? And that changes year by year, right? Like each year you get a new classroom full of students, right? You have to adapt. You have the standards, right? Hey, here are the goals,
right?
Like, hey, defensively, we want to under 3.3 yards per carry, hold them to under 17, and create 3 and outs and takeaways. That's still the goal. But at the end of the day, now each defense will look possibly different of how you get there, right? And that the same thing from the install. Hey, no matter what you're doing schematically, whether it's inside zone or 5-step protection, there's a layer to it of, okay, why do we teach it this way first? What do you teach it against? And then build it from there. So layering a lesson, if you will, building out a lesson plan. It's not just for the day. Now it's about, hey, can you see the forest through the trees, right? Like, and anticipate the roadblocks. And so that's really the biggest stuff for me is like all the like I remember in school it was backwards, like understanding by design, right? You start about backwards design, like start with the end in mind.
Absolutely.
Hey, what is it you're trying to get at the end of the day done, right? Okay. You want an offense or defense that looks complex, but is really simple, right? Very vague statement. But what does that look like now? How do we get there? And you start with, okay, you build the foundational blocks, and then you can transition back and forth, all those good things. So really, it's just that long-term planning, I think, too, and being able to adapt to different learners, right? I think the kids, right, like at the end of the day, we can all draw stuff on a board, and it's fun, and it looks like, hey, this is the coolest new thing. But if we can't communicate it to our guys, right, that's on us.
Amen.
Right? It's like it's on us. Like now, there's accountability, all those things. You gotta have guys that love football, but like when they love it and they can't understand it, that's on me, the teacher. Right? Like I want to make sure whether it's because they can learn through film, right, visually, right? They're hearing it, right, or they got to go out there and do it. Right? Maybe they're writing it down, whatever it is, but we got to present it to them in all those different ways so every type of learner can still be a good football player for you.
That's right. You start talking about having a larger room. I coach receivers for a long time. I have, on some of those teams where we're a lot more 10 personnel, I have 17 receivers. And, man, 1/3 of them like this way, 1/3 of them like this way. So you better be able to reach and teach them all, and it's important.
My final year at John Carroll, I had 33 linebackers. Okay, and then that Midwest, man, those rosters are big. We had 33 linebackers, and all different ages, sizes, skills, like you said, but also the learning, right? Yeah. And some guys were better with a one-on-one, like, hey, quick board review. Some guys, it was, hey, if it wasn't at walkthrough, it was very hard for them to retain. You just learn how to communicate, right? And the biggest thing I found too with that from the teaching part is like, can you demand the same language? Like whether it's how you're identifying things, all that stuff. If you can get the kids to that, the scheme stuff kind of takes care of itself. It's like, what are the fundamental things that we're going to talk about? Block destruction, your keys. If we can get them all speaking the same language, then the rest of the stuff, then it's about, okay, how do I get you taught the new stuff?
Absolutely.
Right? Like the wrinkles week to week.
Yeah.
So, but you're right, man. That's those numbers they'll teach you real quick. Like, hey, it's not just 5 dudes, you and 5 guys. They're like a big time. Like, hey, I got 5 backers this week, or I got 10. And we're good. I got CA do it for me. It's always going to be. You got to be able to teach it. It's a lot of fun that way.
Yeah, man. You said something else that really resonated with me. You were talking about kind of as you're teaching and as you're building your offense or defense or whatever, kind of having that end goal in mind. And sometimes that end goal can always kind of be moving around just a little bit, especially as you're establishing playbook and installing plays, specifics for each week. But it was one of these guys that I was around in the profession. This was one of my favorite times, man. We would sit in spring and we would just really look at our playbook and our vernacular, how we term things, because, and I'm sure you've been there before, maybe been guilty of this before, but like, you can get in a season and say, okay, we're going to call this banana for week 2. All right, this is going to be the adjustment. We're going to call this banana. All right, week 3, we're going to call this 45. And you get to the end of the season and maybe somebody came back, they hadn't been healthy all year, and it's like, okay, that's banana, that's 45. This is pancake, this is dog. And you're like, man, how is my brain supposed to be able to touch this? And you look at the playbook at the end of the year by on your own, and you're like, man, how did I let it get so, it all made sense at the time, but it's messy altogether. And just trying to have kind of rules. And okay, if we're going to put a play in like this, if it's a 2x2, it's going to start with a D word. Or if it's a 3x1, it's going to start with a T word. I know that's pretty common, but just kind of having that thought process so you don't let things get out of whack for your player.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, defensively, I've been, I was an offensive player, and now since I've gotten to college, I've only coached defense. So we'll talk about that another time. Across the side of the ball, right? That's been so much fun with that. But to defensively, right? You can talk to some of the best, and they're still guilty of the wordy randomness of the calls, right? Well, why is it called, Buster, Palms, all those good things? Well, Coach Saban calls it that, right? And rightfully so. I'm not going for that. But what we did when I was at John Carroll, we spent a lot of time, and I'd taken it too from my time at Wilkes. How do you simplify the verbiage so you can deal with tempo?
Yeah.
Right? Take the time ahead of time, right? To organize it into families, right? Like, hey, whatever, these types of work, just like you do on offense. And that's something that it's really important too, like you said, for the guys. Like, hey, if your weapons are your, 3 under, 3 deep pressures, right? Let's say, for argument's sake, like, hey, we're going to call knife or axe.
Right.
Okay. But then, like you said, by week 7, we put in Beretta.
Yeah.
And now, like, he's going to come in. At least there's if you build it from the family of like, we give each guy a handbook that has like an example. And I'm sure not the first, but like that was the first thing we did this year. Like, hey, these are the verbiage terms, just so you could start plugging them in your head. It wasn't about memorizing it. It was about just understanding how you can group the families.
Absolutely.
And now you got young guys who are like, okay, I don't know much, but I know that if we use, let's say, weapons for 3 under 3, I know we're playing some type of pressure here. Yeah. Like, right? So lineman can say, okay, I'm running a pressure. Your back end guy can say, hey, weapons. All right, 3 under 3. Okay, so we're in cover 3-ish, right? Little different rules. Now you give them an opportunity to play a little faster, right? And have those opportunities early. And you take the time to do it. You said just that teaching mindset. Like, okay, how do we make it a little easier to consume, a little faster?
That's
right. And then you can build from there.
Yep, that's amen, man. Well, you alluded to these 300 emails, right? And the famous saying, anytime you sit in those sessions and those guys all tell the same story, and I got the same one as well. Sent a lot of emails out, and all I needed was the one yes, right? That's all we're looking for, is that 301st email that says yeah. And you get one from Wilkes University. Just talk about that process. Like, what happened? You got an email back, and then what?
So it's funny. So the guy who was the head coach at the time, a man by the name of Trey Brown, dear friend. He's actually now assistant at Muhlenberg, where he was an assistant at Muhlenberg when he was my coach. Okay. So he had coached there. He was at Lehigh, Penn before that, Stanford. Great offensive mind. He had taken the Wilkes job, and I had just gotten out of school. I was doing the high school thing, and I applied. And it's funny, the first time around, he jokes about it still. He never checked the email, and I didn't text him because I didn't know. It said no phone calls, so I believed him. You know what I mean? That was the other thing, too. No phone calls, please. But it's like, well, I know Coach Trey. Should I just call him? Like, nah, I guess not. All right, let's go. So I didn't even make it out the first time because it didn't make it out of the email box. So that was a lesson from rookie. You know what I mean? I learned that right away. And then after that fall, 14, the winter come around. And those D3, D2 intern QC jobs, man, like, they're not for the faint of heart, even 10 years ago now, right? In terms of it's not be a ton of pay. I know, my mom was still pretty fired up when I walked away from a full-time teaching job to go take $3,000 at a dorm room. She's like, what are you doing, man? Like, you're crazy, right? But Trey, to his credit, he brought me up and asked me some tough questions too, as he was my coach, right? He's like, listen, like, this is what you want to do. He's like, if you have any doubt that, like, hey, I don't know if I want to coach, do not do this job because you won't be happy.
Yeah, it's tough.
So that I appreciated that from him. And then, him and his staff at the time, they did a great job of, like, they didn't try to grill me on what did I know about defensively. That was their opening they had. They just asked me to teach, right? Like, they literally said, listen, you're going to come up, present to the staff your favorite. Like, they knew I was working with offense. Favorite run play, pass concept, pass protection. Like, pick one of each.
Yeah.
We want you to teach it. We're going to ask you questions. And that struck me. That stuck with me even now. Like, I love that because they weren't curious necessarily about how much I knew because I didn't know what I didn't know. I'd only played O-line. And was just learning more offensive stuff as I went. So went up there and did it, and then kind of took off from there. Did the whole, volunteered that first spring until the contract started. Slept in the office and just tried to soak up as much ball as I could. And then it was a fantastic, 2-year experience there. First year as the intern, QC, working with the D-line, some great kids. Now it's funny. Now my D-line coach here was one of my players at the back then. So he's an engineer here in the Valley. He's our D-line coach as a part-timer, just a great young man. Was an all-region DN. He was like that way before I got my hands on him. Let's put it that way. But he's a great young man, and now it's cool to have that full circle now, years later.
That's right.
Year 2 was able to really I got lucky. Coach Brown, we had a coach who I admired much. One of our assistants had left, and he's like, listen, I'm going to promote you. And I was 23, turning 24, and about to be a full-time coach. And that was really exciting, and it was definitely something that I know I worked my tail off for, but definitely a right place, right time as well. Because some guys, some of the best coaches, still, right, hey, you're a QC, you're a GA, you're doing all this great stuff, but the timing sometimes doesn't work, and that's, so I was very fortunate. And Coach Brown and I still talk to this day. He took a chance on me, and I'll forever be grateful for that.
Amen. Well, anytime you make that transition, our career path, our start is relatively similar. I started off at the high school level. I love ball. I love the opportunity I got to spend with ball. Probably didn't love teaching as much as it sounds like what you did. I was a PE teacher, but man, I had my hands full a lot of times. But
I got you.
But I think at least I feel like everybody kind of has an eye-opening experience when they get those opportunities especially at the lower level, man, where like man, you got to do everything. You have to do so much, and it's not 14 analysts, and it's not 4 GAs and 4 all these other kind of extra guys, quality control. It's just you, maybe a couple other guys, man, and you gotta do the laundry, you gotta paint the field, you gotta do a little bit of everything, which that exposure is fantastic. But to your, I think it was Coach Brown that you said this to his point, like, man, you can't do this if this is not what you want to do, because it's going to be tough. I mean, it's challenging. It's going to be late nights, early mornings, and it's going to take plenty of self-motivation. What kind of eye-opening experiences did you have making that transition from high school to college?
Yeah, well, you're right, because it's not for the faint of heart. I think the big thing, what I loved about it was there was 2 things eye-opening to me. Number one, whether you realize it or not, if you take the money side out of it, you can get lost every day in ball and teaching and coaching and recruiting. Like, there's always something to do. Right. Whereas, like, even when I wanted to be a teacher or coach, it's like, okay, I'd have my history class, social studies, psych, whatever it was. And then I have football after school. And then at night, like any prep that I wanted to do. Right. Where now you kind of get open into a world where you literally have those opportunities to learn, study, and get better. There's always something there schematically, but then to the recruiting side is never sleeping, right? So that was really eye-opening to me, right. Even like having been on the D3 recruiting side as a player in the, a few years prior, it just kind of opened my eyes to what that looks like and the hustle that it takes, not only to just recruit well, but to build meaningful relationships there. Because like you think about it at the lower levels, you're asking kids to pay for school, okay? Yeah. Like whether we like it or not. And even the D2s and FCSs now, like, yes, there are full scholarships. And I tell guys all the time, like, hey, if you get one, I know I'm doing my job right. That means I can evaluate somebody who can help my program, right? And even at the D3 level here. But if you're paying for school, it's got to be, not only is it the right fit of football and academics, but they got to believe too, like, hey, does this guy actually have a plan for me? Does he give a crap about my success and development, and that's really important to me. So that opened it up first. It's just how much football in a day you could do. And it was endless. It always felt like you could do something, whether you're evaluating tape for a recruiting area, getting stuff ready for an admissions tour, right? Like all those little things, even just the operational stuff. And Coach Brown, challenged me with that in terms of, hey, can you help me with this? And then it was like, yeah, sure. And then what else do you need? Like you said, no job's too small. Yeah. And that was the mentality to have. And then really the the second thing is just when you take pride in it, people notice and things start to go well, right? Like, and not even like, oh, hey, because I interned with the Eagles in the scouting department in 15, and it was a couple months. It was great. I got to go down while I was working at Wilkes, went down and just fly on the wall type stuff, right? Making coffee, right? Like I remember Wayne Joseph, who was director of pro scouting. He's like, listen, I need you to help me make up his eval sheet. He wanted it in a certain way, right? He's like, you mess with the computer, you come up with the most organized way you could think of, right? But this is what I want. Like, just gave me the logistics. And I remember spending like 8 hours on it because I'm like, hey, I want this guy to be impressed, right? But also, too, it's like he's giving me the creative freedom to help organize him.
Yeah.
Okay? So I want his first reaction to be, okay, yeah, this is what I like this. You know what I mean? So just that no job is too big or small. It's like, hey, I could have just printed out a template of Excel and just said, here you go, brother.
Yeah.
But instead, I took the time and I tried to be like, how would I want to make it work? What would it look like so it fits on the right sheet, whatever. And I remember him coming back and being like, dude, this is awesome. Like, and that was like, for me, it was just like that validation of if you take pride in it, even if he came back, because I've had it come back where it's like, nah, it looks like hell. You know what I mean? Like, but the effort though, like, hey,
right.
Like, take that urgency into anything and good things will follow. So like, that's the eye-opening thing for me is it didn't matter how little the job was, that you could still make an impact.
Amen.
Right. And that's been the fun part, you know, and now, like I said, it's something I try to impress upon the young coaches that I have now, you know, like, hey man, like whether it's you're making the pot of black coffee for the day, you know, like it doesn't matter. Like, it's not that you're making it more than it is, but it's like, take time, make sure you do it right. You put your name on it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think that's something that, you know, kind of as I reflect back on my career, you know, I was able to be promoted, you know, from a graduate assistant to a full-time position at a place that I was at. I was able to see a couple guys do that. I was able to see some guys do that. Maybe I didn't see them get promoted, but I was like, man, if I ever get myself in a position, that's the kind of guy I would hire. And then there were other guys that nothing wrong with them. They came and they did what they were supposed to do, the way they were asked to do it. And you know, no more, no less, but kind of remained that. And it's just always interesting when you're willing to kind of go to an extra mile. And like you said, really just put your name on it and say, man, hey, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to extra do it. It's going to be well executed. And, you know, I'm going to be proud of my work. And I'm, you know, not looking for kudos, but I want him to remember, you know,
100%.
And probably more than anything, man, I think a mentality, at least that I carried, was I want them not to want me to leave because how easy I make their jobs, how much better I make their job. I want to be irreplaceable. And it's hard to do in that business when you're just looking for every little opportunity you can to stand out. But yeah, that goes a long way. You know, you could.
Well, it's building that trust too, right? Like in the profession, it's hard, not hard, but like, you need to rely on people if you're going to have success.
Yeah.
So if the highest compliment you can give an assistant is like, I trust that guy.
Yeah.
And the more, from the simplest to now, it becomes more and more.
Right.
Right. And it's not because, oh, you're taking advantage of them. No, they're trusting their livelihood. It's in your hands.
Right.
So if you treat it as such with every little job, right, they'll be like, hey, this is a key part of what I'm doing, whether it's you're having success or, hey, even like after I had left Wilkes, like they had struggled, they had a coaching change, like, but that didn't change Trey, you know, and I still talk about like, hey, like both of us, we trusted one another, right? That'll never go away. Like that work at, you know what I mean? If you ever cross paths again. So like, it's just building that trust and that when you could be called reliable, dependable, to do a good job, that could be your highest compliment, you know, that's 100%.
Well, you talked a little bit about the scouting intern. I was going to ask that question there with the Eagles. You know, obviously, you know, some of those interns, you can be really hands-on. Some of them you're not as hands-on, but all of them, you should take away something from it. What were you able to take away from that opportunity that's helping you out to this day?
Yeah. Well, one, I think, too, where I was really lucky, in my opinion, was it was a hands-on deal, right? Like in terms of what questions, the feedback, the access, like we were helping the scouting assistants with their wire reports and sitting in on meetings, and they would ask us questions of like what we thought as they're evaluating the roster, right? So like definitely, and like I said, Dwayne Joseph at the time, like really was like, hey, you're my guy for these, you know, once that you're here, let's work together, boom. So I'd say the biggest thing was just the back and forth of different ideas, especially in the scouting world. Like sometimes you hear it and you see it on TV, right? You think, hey, if it's Mel Kiper saying it, one thing, this, right, that, like the back and forth, how the guys that could articulate what they were looking for the most efficiently and effectively are the guys that usually ended up winning out, right? But then also too, like what were each scout or like the people in charge, what are they actually valuing? And it was for me too, for just, again, I was just starting coaching. What are they looking for in intangibles that I can now take back when I was recruiting, right? Even at the smaller level.
Yeah.
And for me, the one that always stuck out was the feet. Okay. So it's funny. It's like, it's simple enough, but like slow feet don't eat. We all know the saying, right? But at the end of the day, even at the highest of levels, regardless of position, that was a majority of guys were like, the footwork, the foot speed, the stuff we're seeing on tape, if it's slow there, right, it's not going to be able to work. There is no project that fixes it, right? So little things like that were big, where that still plays to this day. I could be watching a potential D3, D2 lineman, a potential FCS quarterback. If he's got heavy feet that aren't like nimble, and then I see him in person and it's the same thing, it'll probably be really hard for him to have success wherever he goes, right? It doesn't limit him, but just like those clues, like it's still the same, just obviously millions and millions of dollars at stake up there, whether they're right or wrong. But I was able to take a lot of those and now, again, try to pass it on where we find those intangible things that we're looking for to, from a recruiting standpoint, that's what we'll be able to take for sure.
Absolutely. Now, we were talking a little bit about, or I guess I was talking about, doing a good job where I was at and then having an opportunity to get promoted. Seems like you did just that. You had the opportunity to get promoted there at Wilkes, and then, transition from intern quality control type role to the defensive line type role. Once again, at some of those smaller universities, sometimes that just means you're over the D line. You still got a lot of those same tasks. Were you able to? Were you still heavily involved in some of the QC type of tasks, but had the D line, or were you able to kind of, I guess, not?
It was a little bit of everything. It was a little bit of everything. So the D line was great. I was able to have that. Really, the only thing that added was more recruiting and like operational responsibility, to be honest, which was great. And I always, and the DC there, Cole Glennon at the time, one thing I always appreciated was, even when I was the intern, we all had a piece of the breakdown stuff, because in smaller schools, like, I think that's really important. Even at our level now, like we talk about, hey, like each of us has a little piece, so there's ownership of it. Absolutely. And then we're all kind of watching that tape, as we're going through. Yeah. So that, like, the QC type of things didn't always necessarily get larger. Like, I would still help my role there, but then I just added more operational recruiting responsibility, which was a lot of fun, and then defensively too, like just year two with the D line, having that full, like, okay, building better relationships with them, knowing what makes them tick, right? And then adding young guys in that second year is always interesting too, of like new freshmen coming in and how does the chemistry of that room go? So, it was definitely a lot of fun, a great learning experience. And, and too, like it helped me become, start to prepare to be a play caller. At that point, that second year, I called the JV game defenses for us, and I had never called a game like defensively ever. So it was like, kind of like, okay, like, not that you had a ton of time to prep for it, but it was a great way to just start scratching that itch of something like, hey, why do we do X fronts and stunts with this coverage or things like that? So just started making me think a little more big picture. Yeah. Because in intern QC, you're like, all right, tunnel vision. How can I help the guy ahead of me? Yeah. Like, right, boss, like, hey, I want to be reliable. And then now, as a position coach, you still want to do that. You want to help the coordinator, help the head coach. But now in these little roles, okay, you're calling the diva. Well, crap, they never told me to worry about coverage. I was doing the D line. Yeah. You know what I mean? So this started scratching that itch and really opening my eyes to that.
Yeah, yeah. And, I hate using terms like selfish and selfless, stuff like that, because, I mean, we just pour so much into each other in order to make the program run forward. But it's nice to be able to have that, be able to take care of yourself a little bit. And like, now the next time, when you get that defensive coordinator opportunity there in 2020 for the first time, it's your first time with the title, but it's not your first time saying, okay, this is the kind of stuff that I'm looking at. I'm sure you were able to kind of make some some costly mistakes but with the JV squad, you know, not under a
Oh, yeah.
microscope, and just be able to kind of learn. And that's great for your development. You know, all the stuff that when you're helping others is still great for your development. But that's great that you were able to kind of get that opportunity. It's interesting. I just hadn't been around those programs that have the JVs, and you know, the more of these podcasts I do that are more in the Northeast, they tend to have a lot more of that. And it just seems like such an advantageous opportunity to really develop a younger coach and let him get some of that exposure.
Yeah, it's great for both, man. I tell you, so here at Moravian in year 2, we just had our first 2 JV games. We just finished our second one yesterday. But they haven't had it in about a decade, you know, really? And I brought it back. Yeah, just numbers wise. And, you know, we're at about 105 now, which is exciting for year 2. But I look at it, we're at, you know, John Carroll, you know, playing Mount Union in those schools out in the OAC. We had like 6 or 7 of them because you had such large rosters. It's like AAA.
Yeah.
So, like, there could be a freshman, right, or even a sophomore, like, who, hey, let's say he got hurt during camp, right? Like a sophomore, you were really excited, or a junior, right? You obviously don't play seniors, right? But a guy that, like, hey, he needs a rehab start, right? It's like that AAA, that pitcher that goes down and throws 3 innings, strikes everybody out, like, all right, he's back ready to the big.
Yeah.
Or the young prospect of, like, hey, 2 weeks of camp, he couldn't fully break the 2 deep. I remember when I got to John Carroll my second year there in 18 when we broke the sack record. You know, we had a freshman D line who had 6 sacks in the first 2 JV games. And I'm like, okay, so, and not that he was playing poorly in the practice, just now, like, I see that on tape against a Mount Union JV team, a ball wants to, so our conference competitors, I want to keep an eye on him. I want to get him into the rotation. By week 7, he was literally getting snaps into our playoff run, about 15, 20 snaps a game. And it started with those JV opportunities because scout's great, right? Scout team, all that stuff, indie work. But the JV programs, I still feel it's a great way to give live bullet reps. And then you start to see too, like, hey, when the pressure's on,
yeah,
who do you want to continue to work with there?
Right. Yeah,
for sure.
Shows up. Yeah, for sure. Now, the interesting thing about the profession, I don't know if I've really talked about this much, is like, you get a certain age. I know you're a part of our 35 on 35, so you're still pretty young in this whole deal. But you kind of get and it's not even a certain age. It's more like a certain amount of experience. And you just get a little bit more comfortable with the profession. You know, okay, hey, we got fired. All right, what's next? Hey, you know, I'm getting a call from here. What's next? What do we do? Right. But when you're early in the profession and you're like, Wilkes is the best job I've ever had, you know, and you're just super excited about it. And then, you know, regardless of how the opportunity ends, it ends. And, you know, John Carroll all of a sudden ends up in the picture. What was that thought process like as you went and got your feet wet at Wilkes, got promoted, you know, all that kind of stuff, and all of a sudden John Carroll shows up? How did it show up, and what was that thought process in terms of making the transition?
Yeah, so, yeah, you're right. Like, I had never had thoughts outside of, hey, like, I got promoted at Wilkes, which was exciting year 2, and we had a better year. We had, you know, had some upsets that year. I was really excited to head into recruiting, and then, you know, it was funny that someone I had met at the Eagles internship was working in Michigan, and the new head coach at John Carroll, Tom Arth and Brandon Staley, were there, and they just, you know, made their run, and now they were going to Chicago Bears and Chattanooga, respectively. And a guy by the name of Rick Finati, you know, knew some people that I did. We kind of had mutual connections there, and he called me. He's like, hey, I'm the new head coach at John Carroll. I want a young D-line coach that knows D3 to come out, because he was coming from, you know, he had been a high school coach at St. Edward for years, you know, won a bunch of titles, and then had a lot of D1 experience coming onto the staff, like the coordinators that he hired, you know, Kyle Hope, Mike Switzer, you know, and so he's like, hey, I want a guy that's D3 experience, right, to help me. And that was intriguing to me because I didn't know Rick. Right. Like, so I only knew of him, like, through that mutual. We had never spent time together, never worked together. And it was hard for me because Trey, I had played for, right? My boss, right? So, and we were building things there. And then, you know, I had been promoted to full time, and it basically, you know, Trey, again, I love him like, you know, second father, you know, and, you know, brother. Like, he said to me, he's like, listen, I always tell a guy to be careful if you don't know somebody. He's like, you just got to make sure you're doing it for the right reason.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just for chase and all those things. And I appreciated that. He didn't say like, yo, dude, like, what are you doing? Right. You know, what, like, he understood, because I looked at it too. It's like, I was young, I was single. I didn't have, you know, if I'm going to take a risk, why not now? I'd never been to Cleveland, never passed state college PA, you know, in my life. So, I was like, you know what, let's give it a shot at a place that, you know, Cleveland had never been, but like football in Ohio, Northeast Ohio is a big deal, you know, and who better to learn from? And then when I saw like, yeah, they play Mount Union, they play, you know, the Wisconsin Whitewater, the teams that I grew up watching on ESPN, and the teams that when I was playing at Muhlenberg and go to the playoffs, we played at Wesley, you know, we wanted to beat those guys. And I was like, all right, well, if I can go coach out there and what, you know, just see what's up, like see what can I learn? What can I learn and how can I help? So that was kind of how that opportunity happened. And, you know, a 5-hour phone call with Rick later, I got offered the job. So talked a lot about life. So the teaching thing came up because of him being a former teacher, right? He had worked at Michigan with Harbaugh for a few years. He was on his first staff there. But he's like, yeah, I'm a teacher at heart. I think we clicked on that. And then when I got there, it just became about how to, again, just went back to how can I help?
Yeah.
Right. Like, yes, the D-line coach. And, you know, how can I help the DC and the head coach, you know, install what they wanted to do defensively. And then truly, you know, operationally, recruiting wise, I was like, all right, I just want to like, recruiting, I got to know the area. Right. So I just started working at that. And then operationally, that was where I got a ton of experience because Rick leaned on me a lot of like, hey, some of these rules are different than what I'm used to, or hey, what are the expectations, budgets, and so that was cool that Trey had prepared me in that way, and then now there, it was kind of like the perfect storm of some things that I had experience with, and now was able to provide some guidance there. And to Rick's credit, he was humble enough to say like, hey, how you can help me here,
right?
You know, not just like, hey, I'm going to do it my way, I'll figure it out. Like that, he was very intentional of like, hey, these are the guys I hire. Each of you has roles, and then that was mine, along with the coaching side of things.
Yeah, man. It's interesting. You kind of talked about that conversation with Coach Brown, leading up to you taking that opportunity at John Carroll. You know, once again, I kind of reflect back on my experience. You know, I had the opportunity to play for the coach, coach for the coach I played for in college, almost like you with Coach Brown, right? And you know, when it was time for me to part ways, you know, I took a different opportunity at a different school, and it was kind of the same thought process, man. I'm young, I'm not married, I'm not making enough money now. Let me stay broke for a little bit and be able to take some of these type of jobs and expand my network and all that kind of stuff. And I definitely had some moments where I'm just like sitting in a dorm room in Jackson, Mississippi at Millsaps College, like, man, I don't got enough money to eat right now. Like, what am I doing? You know, the football stuff and the guys I worked with were awesome. Like, all that stuff was cool, but some of those moments show up, right? What were some of those moments like where you were just, you know, they're in Cleveland? I don't say they don't necessarily have to be like mine, but you were kind of like, hey, what am I doing? Did I make the right decision? You know, all those kind of things. What were some of those tougher parts of that deal?
I think the first month or so was wild just because, you know, I grew up in southern New Jersey, went to college in eastern PA. Like, I hadn't really ventured out.
Yeah.
Like, Wilkes-Barre was 2 hours north of where I grew up. That was about as far as I had gone.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm being honest, right? Like, in terms of long term. So when I got to Cleveland, again, kudos to the staff, Rick, and like he made it like a family in that he wanted to make sure, like, hey, anything you needed. But there were times when I was, you know, found a place to live, you're by yourself, you're just kind of like, all right, I got no idea where I'm at, right? Like, now it's a cool part of Cleveland, the eastern suburbs there, so it wasn't like it was in a very beautiful area. So like, I in no way I'm complaining, but just looking around, sometimes you stare at the TV, you stay on the ceiling, like, dang, you know, I miss home, or hey, like. So my answer to that was just go to work. Yeah. And, you know, like, why are you here? You love football, right? And that was, so I spent a lot of time at the office, and, you know, John Carroll, I encourage anybody who hasn't been, you know, go check it out. It's one of the coolest places I've ever been. I spent 6 years there, and it's football royalty, you know, it's close second to the Hall of Fame in terms of you look around at how many names are there and the different coaches and players, Don Shula, London Fletcher, right? Well, there's the way it's set up in the stadium. Your office is down in the basement of the stadium, right by the weight room, varsity weight room, man. So literally, I'm 50 yards from Don Shula Stadium's turf. 20 feet from the weight room, and I got more film than I ever dream of access to. So I just dove into that, man. And recruiting wise, like, hey, you got your areas. The huddle makes it super easy now. You had your Twitter. You hop on. All right, I'm going to crank out my area evals and hop on the phone and be like, listen, man, I'm sitting in Don Shula Stadium thinking about you wanting to come play football. So there was always like a something that could be done that didn't really let me get too sad or like, because I had them, but I was like, all right, like, let's go to work, right? And then each year I got more comfortable. You know, I met my now wife out there. She's from Cleveland, you know, and you know, obviously was able to, you know, carve out the times where, hey, I'm hustling, but still, hey, you know, being able to build a family there. We had our daughter, you know, in 2021, and then, you know, so she's now 3 and ruling the house now. But you know, at the end of the day, like, it actually becomes more like home. You know, obviously you create more time and find your rhythm and your routine for sure. But that first couple months, it was, why are you there? You know what I mean? You don't let yourself dwell. And again, everybody's, you know, mental space is different. That was just how I approached it. It was like, hey, remember why you're here. It ain't to sit inside and think about where you left. You know,
that's
like that. Do I miss home? Yes. Do I, you know, that's what FaceTime's for. I'm very blessed. Like, hey, the guys coming up before you and me, man, like, dang, you know, it wasn't, there wasn't FaceTime. You know what I mean? Like that probably was really hard, you know? And, so like, it's like, hey, I'll talk to them when I get some time, but if not, let's go hustle. Let's learn. Let's go get my doctorate in football and, you know, watch all the film I had hands on to get the access. You know, you have Brandon Staley, Tom Ark, guys who were coaching the NFL, literally were just there. Watch what they did, pick their brains when they come back. It was all, you know what I mean? Like there was a lot of fun in terms of, you know, great people and great people to learn from. So that was definitely an awesome deal. And then just growing every day, you know, it was a football incubator. You know, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's honestly kind of the back part of my story. Probably about the same. You know, it was right there in the dorm on campus. I just, all right, cool. Well, let me go to the football office, watch the film. You know, get ahead on something just like that. Now, it's always interesting, man, having an opportunity to sit in the seat and then, you know, I've got to talk to the amount of people that I've talked to and share these stories. And it's pretty awesome hearing about the John Carroll at the beginning. You know, obviously you just kind of dove in. I don't think it was anything negative or anything like that. You got to work. You grew a ton as a coach. Well, I think it's always special too, man. Some of these spots, you know, they just end up kind of being a special place for us because, man, we grow as a coach. We meet our significant other. We have our kid there. And it's just one of these places where it's like, man, you know, I never have anything bad to say about you, old John Carroll. You know, is that one of those spots for you, man?
Yeah, you know, I mean, my wife grew up she grew up down the street from their big rival, Ball and Wild. So that's, you know, always going to have a special place. Cleveland in general, right? Like just like my in-laws are there. My daughter, we try to make a trip or two out a year to make sure she always has Cleveland as part of their home. But yeah, the people at John Carroll were fantastic. You know, the coaches we had, the alums, the admin, they took me in, you know, a fast talking Jersey guy, you know, in the Midwest, you know, they made me feel like I was at home. Right. The students, the players, the relationships I have, you know, and I could text those guys right now and we may not talk a ton of ball anymore, but like we talk about the good stuff, you know, and laugh about the crazy stuff that happened or the funny stuff, or even just, hey man, like, I love you, you know, like that's the cool part that being a man at Carroll, and when you graduate from there, I didn't graduate from there, but that's what they talk about. It's a family for life. And, you know, those guys truly are, you know, and they've always been super gracious to me and welcomed me inside of that. And really too, like just growing as a person, like you said, you know, my family and things like that, but also growing as a coach. Like, you know, I work with a guy by the name of Joe Schaefer, you know, who's now at Syracuse with Coach Fran and they're doing a phenomenal job with Elijah and all those guys. Like Schaefer challenged me to grow. He was my DC there, you know, in 18 and 19, and challenged me. Kyle Hoke I'd worked with before, taught me a ton, you know, about what, you know, the next steps and the things that he, you know, in the profession. But Joe challenged me in terms of, hey, you want to be a D-line coach the rest of your life, or you actually want to coordinate? You know, like in terms of how I studied things and how I was teaching, right? Like I was very D-line centric, right? You know, you can make things simpler, right? All that good stuff. You're trying to, you know, keep it as simple as possible. But now Joe was, and still is to this day, one of the smartest coaches I've been around. So when he challenged me, hey, you're going to be in Washington Skelly with me. We're going to put these coverages together, right? Like from top to bottom, back to front. It opened my eyes, you know, and it was an awesome transition, you know, when he left for Youngstown State and then I was able to become the next coordinator. I felt prepared because of how he had, you know, worked with me and mentored me and, you know, held me accountable too. Like I said, like Joe's, my standard it didn't change. How could I help Joe? He was calling the plays. What could I do as the D-line coach, the year we broke the sack record, he'd be like, all right, Jeff, what stunt you want? What's going to attack this protection? I made sure that I studied my tail off all that week to make sure I knew in those key moments when he wanted my opinion that it was like, hell yeah, brother, let's go. The hell you thinking, man? This was like hell. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, so that was the same mindset that kept popping up. And then there, I got to grow into that coordinator role and then learned a lot too. We played that spring COVID season. It was technically my first coordinating deal, and learned about, again, how do you make it yours too? Like, as a play caller, everything is, yes, you could have a playbook. You could have like, hey, I've been coaching it, but until it's your call, right? You don't know what your style necessarily is yet.
Right.
And I know for a fact that spring season, I tried to replicate Joe. I was like, what would Joe call? Right. And I said that in my own head. And I think that's what I was trying to do. Whereas like then that fall, after we played the couple games, I started to get more comfortable. Like, all right, well, what do I believe in? Right. We believe in the core principles, but now as a play caller, what are the things that I like to put us in a position with our roster to do well? Not like, hey, this is what Joe did in 19. And that allowed me to grow up as a play caller, to have those things, have those failures early of like, dang, that didn't work the way I thought it would. I was trying to do what we'd done before, but I didn't adapt to who we were, and then those final years were just a lot of fun of as a staff and as a defense and as a team, just like really putting it all together and watching the great things happen from it. So it was definitely a special place. Starts with the people and just, my personal growth there will always be a really special one.
Yeah, man. Well, let me brag on you real quick, man. During that time frame as a defensive coordinator, OAC Assistant Coach of the Year, runner-up in 2021 and 22, you led all of college football. You and your team, you and your defense, led all of college football in sacks. You had over 30 in each of your 3 seasons. It's a lot more here. Let me see. Over 6 season span, led all of college football in sacks per game with 3.53, 2017 and 19. This is prior to you being to DC. Led all of college football, all levels in sacks per game at 3.94. Just an amazing run from a defensive front. Whether you were the DC or not, obviously been able to kind of get your feet wet a little bit and find your style. Sounds like it took you to another level. But the interesting thing, I guess, is you were there for a couple of years before you get the opportunity, and you were interviewing, quote unquote, I guess, per se, for that defensive coordinator role without even knowing it. What were you doing to allow for them to entrust you? Especially, let's be blunt here. Like, defensive line, a lot of times don't get that opportunity because they don't look at the back end very much, right? Or vice versa. The back end doesn't look at the front. So typically you see these linebacker safety type guys a lot more, at that coordinator position. So just being able to kind of break that mold, understand what was going on all levels. How were you able to interview and be the right guy for that job?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Like I said, Joe Schaaf and I, really worked closely together, and he grilled me, man. There were times, we would be in there till 1, 2 in the morning in the off season, putting in the coverages, and then it's like, all right, you do it. It's 3, like literally, like there was a training that went on because we both loved it, and like I said, I'll be forever grateful. And Rick Finati, our boss, watched it happen, so that helped. Like, even when he wasn't there, he knew it was going on. And then too, I think he watched and he was looking for. We were big on okay, we obviously would meet as a full defense, but when we split, we were able to take at times front 7, back 7, right? I would have the front 6, so to speak, for some days, or the front 5 backers and D line. Hey, the backers will pop over with Schaaf for the back end stuff. So Joe and Rick I got to see hey, I was able to be organized and have those things that they were looking for, and hey, that consistency. Because if you're a part of something good, in my opinion, and it's not about hey putting your own stamp on it, where you want to change everything. It's can you be consistent for the kids?
Yeah, for sure.
Too. I think Rick, that's what gave him comfort in that changeover when Joe did leave, and he's okay, we've had success, right? That 6-year span of, the leading all of college football sacks per game. Well, it started those 3 years, right, when Joe was there. So as a D-line coach, it's me, but Joe's the one calling the plays. So for all intents and purposes, I didn't do nothing yet. I had great players who believed we did, But now, how do we get that consistency where it still was over that 6-year span? Like, wow, no, it's still happening, right? It came from that organization, and then showing them too is like, hey, we could still be very similar. The ethos of what we do hasn't changed. Just the stylistic, or just, hey, this year coverage wise or pressure wise, this fits us a little better.
Yeah.
Or hey, what wrinkles, right? Like, so I think it was more just the organizational side of things, and then was there a consistency in that preparation of like for the kids? I think that's how you could separate yourself in that situation where, hey, are you a guy D-line or not? You know, and then just demand like too, you could stay in your lane, but you've got to use the off season and your resources around you to want to know more. Amen. And I think that's, like I said, I was blessed, truly blessed that Joe wanted to challenge me and thought of me that I could do it. Because I didn't know. Like I said, I was like, hey, I'll coach D-line and, coach it hard and we'll call it a day. But then it kind of opened my eyes, and then also gave me a lot of opportunities to come to it.
That's awesome, man. Well, after a successful stint there at John Carroll, you get the call of a lifetime. Just talk to us about how all of a sudden you end up in the seat that you're sitting in right now.
Yeah, so it's funny, Muhlenberg, where I played, Moravians, they're a big rival, right? And that's now it's my job to go take down my alma mater, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Every year, and it's something that we're going to continue to build with every year. But like we just finished 22 at John Carroll. We had gone through a coaching change. We had our interim coach, and then Jeff Behrman took over, and I was ready to stay. I was excited. We had a new coach, and he's like, hey, listen, you run the defense, like let's ride. Jeff was an alum there. And like I said, it was great people. So I was like, all right, cool. And then Moravian reached out, and I was always intrigued because this place is one, like I said, I was taught it was the rival, right?
Right.
But it was the cool thing about it was when I played, I remember my freshman year, we played here at Moravian. We were going to the playoffs. They actually upset us that year. But it was the loudest stadium I'd ever been in any of the one I played. Okay. And it's just got the old covered like grandstand like Mount Union. It's one of the only two left in the country, right? The original Bethlehem steel, right up there. It's about a really unique spot. And when they called, they're like, listen, their coach had been an alum, stepped down. We want to, bring you in and talk about, hey, we want to build this for the future. And the passion that they had of like, hey, we want to change, we want to take this thing to the next level, we want to compete on a national level. That excited me, and when they were reaching out, I said, okay, this is an area I knew well. It's about 15 minutes from where I went to school. I student taught in this area. I coached high school football in this area. It's an hour and a half from where I grew up. Just a lot of those things were intriguing. And I'm like, okay, let me go out here and check this out. And, because remember, my wife's a Cleveland girl, so if I was going to present something, it better be like, hey, we're going to take you home. It better not be no joke, it can't be just, so you're right. It was exciting, and then I got out here and I met the people and I saw the campus again, and I was like, okay, can I recruit here? Right. When I walk on campus and I'm in awe of like how beautiful it is and things like that, and the different things they got downtown. I'm like, okay, I could sell this to a family. I could sell this to a player, and I could see myself calling this place home. And really they did a phenomenal job, in my opinion, of selling me on their commitment to the university. Is like, hey, we want to make changes. We want to do better. And they needed, someone who they believe aligned with their values, which I believe I did in terms of, we talk about pride, poise, and toughness in terms of what we're going to do each day as a program, but also hey, what it's going to take to change. Because like I don't have all the answers. Like that was the thing I told him too. I said, listen, I have ideas, and I have things that I would do well, and I have things that like, hey, I'm going to lean on you guys too, right? Like I think that's the big thing. But I said, like, if we listen to one another and are able to make changes from what's currently there, and invest time, invest resources, and put it the right way, you can get some great things going. It's been very exciting. We're in year 2 now, and playing a great schedule is really tough. But now just week by week, starting to see the fruits of the labor come out, and it's a lot of fun.
Amen. Now, I know you got to get going here relatively quickly, but I want to ask you this question: what's been the biggest jump from you personally, from year 1 head coach to year 2 head coach?
Yeah, I think definitely, the lay of the land. That I say, especially and it doesn't matter size, right? Like being a head coach year one, if you think you know it, right, you can know some of it.
Right.
But I'd be lying if I said, oh, every situation I encountered was totally planned up here. We knew it was coming, right? Like, I'd be lying. Okay. But year two, you know the lay of the land. You anticipate roadblocks better, right? And what do I mean by that? Whether it's scheduling practice times based on class conflicts, or hey, academic check-ins and scheduling those. You're not waiting until after midterms, right? Or like, hey, even I'll give you a funny one. So spring break here, I got the job February 1st. We have like one of the earliest spring breaks in the country. It's like the third week of February it starts. I'm like,
wow.
Wait, what? So like, I remember I'm scheduling spring ball out like I did at John Carroll, because I didn't think like, oh, they have an earlier spring break, their semester ends earlier.
Right.
For the first spring, right? Like, and this is spring of now 23. And I got my schedule and they're looking at me, they're like, Jeff, you got practice like after school at South. I'm like, what are you talking about? Doesn't everybody just kind of go the same calendar, right? It's just a stupid thing you don't think about until it's like, I had done 6 years of like, hey, this is the calendar. And Wilkes was similar in their calendar. I'm like, okay, almost a decade of, hey, this school's going to end around mid-May, right? Finals week. So I'm good if I go up to like May 1st, May 3rd, then I'm done. And they're like, no, Jeff, we're like done May 2nd. I'm like, oh, my bad. So like this year, like year two now, scheduled a little tighter. Not that crazy. Like, I'm like, what do you mean? I'm looking at them like they're nuts. Like, what do you mean you're done that early? You know? So it was definitely little things like that, you know? And then too, I think any program, any position, right? It's about building relationships with the players. And year two, I think, you know, I was able to evaluate myself. What can I do better to find out what makes them tick, how they, you know, respond. And two, like what's the best thing for the crew? Like in terms of, hey, yes, we want to individualize our teachings, but as a team, like what helps the team, and how to, you know, how can I do little wrinkles and things to keep it fun and keep it, you know, not always fire and brimstone all the time. You know what I mean? So like, as you're changing a culture in a program, or you're trying to flip a program, right? At times you feel like you got to be, you know, all the time, right? Like, hey, we're here to work. We're here to this. Get this, like this isn't a hobby, right? You know, and you can have that, but now like it's just finding that balance now. And I think it's been a lot of fun to see that in myself and the guys, like enjoying it where, we're here to work, but now too, like having those lighter moments and being more comfortable in your own skin, because you've built the year and a half now, 2 years of relationships.
Amen.
Whereas year one, you're trying to do that, but you're also like, hey, listen, we have to change here too. You know, like that's been a lot of fun to see it just kind of unfold before our eyes.
Amen. Well, Coach, definitely wishing you the best of luck. Before I let you go here, I do want to ask, this past January, you were chosen to participate in AFCA's 35 under 35 Coaches Leadership Institute. Just talk about your experience with that. Hopefully all positive. I know that's my baby, but just talk a little bit about your experience and why people should apply and be, you know, try to get into that program.
Well, I can't say enough positives about it. I was honored, man. Like it's funny. My wife, she'll tell this story, you know, if she ever gets asked one day, is like, I wasn't even going to apply that last year. You know, I had applied a few times and I was like, man, it's just not in the cards for me, you know, like it's okay.
Yeah.
And my wife's like, put it in. And I was like, I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, I know, it's July, send your stuff in. She's like, I got a feeling. I'm like, okay. And thank God I did, you know what I mean? Because we ended up getting selected, and, you know, I go and you just get to meet the meeting of the young minds, regardless of level of football, is so exciting. And then, like, you guys do the event the night before, the past classes, and the little fraternities that are, you know, they're so few and far between, right? To be a part of something like that, it's special. And, you know, like, just staying in contact with the guys, like, hey, you know, best of luck this week. Like, I'll say week 2 this year, we upset Utica. It was a big upset, right? I got literally half a dozen texts from that group of like, yo, man, I see you working. Like, some guys are up in FBS, Power 5, right? Power 4 now. Sorry. I know the names all change all the time. I don't want to get in trouble. D3 still D3, baby. We're good down here. Right. But a couple of those guys are like, yo, brother, great job. So, you know what I mean? And we didn't know each other from Adam before that event. And then too, like it's an eye-opening thing, in my opinion, to the profession of, hey, like just getting around the different levels and hearing from guys who had done it before, and just how are things different, right? And what it's going to be, how, like if that ever becomes something where it's a conversation, like what steps did they take? It's always great to pick brains there.
Yeah. And
for you guys too, the way you run it, I think it's super organized, and it's about building the network, but also making it informative. You know, and I think that's the beautiful dual side of the coin you're trying to marry there. Right. You don't want it to be a 4-day event where it's too much, but you also don't want it to be just a cocktail hour, right? Like, so I think you do a nice job of marrying the two of what the purpose is. And now I'm excited too to now, like I said, like you said, like, hey, whenever you need me to come back, I'll be excited to impart whatever little wisdom, you know, nickel's worth of free advice, and happy to do it, because it was very eye-opening and just exciting to see for sure.
Well, Coach, we sure appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for taking the time and all that good stuff, and look forward to hopefully seeing you there in Charlotte here in January, okay?
Oh, yeah, we'll be there, baby. But I appreciate you, Marion, for having us on. This is a great deal, and, you know, honored to been a part of it, and always honored to keep working with you guys at AFCA. You know, you do great things, so I appreciate it.
Amen. I appreciate you, brother. Have a good one.
You too. See ya.
CoachComm has been delivering tough headsets for tough teams for more than 31 years. It's why 97% of FBS teams and thousands of high schools across the country rely on CoachComm. Get the best for your team. Visit CoachComm.com for more info.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Headset, presented by CoachComm. If you'd like to learn more about this week's episode, head over to AFCA.com. There, you can access every episode and find corresponding show notes. Remember, you can catch every episode of Inside the Headset presented by CoachComm on wherever you get your podcast, including Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. While you're there, we'd love for you to take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Your feedback helps us improve and grow. Keep up with the latest news by following us on social media. Connect with us at Inside the Headset, and remember to tag us when you share your favorite episodes. For more updates on all things AFCA, be sure to follow the @WeAreAFCA social media accounts. If you're not a part of the AFCA community yet, visit AFCA.com to join thousands of NFL, college, and high school coaches nationwide and across the globe. Elevate your coaching game with an AFCA membership. You'll gain exclusive access to the annual AFCA convention, magazine, digital library, and AFCA Insider email. Stay up to date with the latest stories and news on the AFCA website. More than just a convention, the AFCA offers continuous education, guidance, networking, and more. Celebrate the past and shape the future with the AFCA. It's about fostering exceptional coaches who create outstanding teams and even better individuals. Invest in your skills and make a lasting impact today by engaging with the AFCA. Your journey starts here.